Yeah. And so that's how I end up advising and mentoring teams and organizations in agility, lean, complexity thinking, and basically modern product and engineering management. What is interesting talking about today's presentation is that is this acceleration of technological innovation and also our turbulent world with a lot of crises that we faced during last years. And because of this, I started to face some kind of elusive problems, kind of problems that are ambiguous, kind of problems that are not always clear until after you have developed working solutions, problems that shift, change, and even after you think you solve them, they come back and you have constantly have to pay attention to them. And I'm not being the only one having to deal with this elusive problem, but many people in their life, at work, in teams, and in organization have to deal with them. So here we are at the topic of this session. I'm trying to invite you to be my thinking partner around this question. Given all these elusive problems, do we need a new philosophy of work management and leadership or not? And I have condensed some ideas in a short video, 10, 12 minutes video that I'm going to show to you. And let's see what comes up into your mind. And later we talk about that together. What are your thoughts, stories, example, comment, and reflection? Pay attention. You may need to control your audio on your computer. It may go up or down. But yeah, let me share the video and let's start.
Daddy says he predicts exactly when Mars will be in the sky, even in 100 years. But the funny thing is that Daddy doesn't know what will happen to him 2 minutes from now.
Leaders like engineering, product and business managers and CTO nowadays have to grapple with elusive problems and opportunities. Even informal leaders that people trust, listen to and follow. These elusive problems are pervasive and hard to solve. They are persistent and require our constant attention. It is kind of a paradox. On one hand, we can predict the exact position in the sky of a planet, say 400 years from now. But on the other, the execution of our well-thought strategy can suddenly fall apart. Because we are unable to forecast if a project will finish on time or even if it will be feasible at all. And unforeseen events and unexpected changes can take us off guard. So, on one hand, some projects and plans run like a clockwork. On the other, some remain elusive like clouds. Elusive problems have been around for ages. We call them Gordian knot, wicked problems, VUCA world, more recently complexity. And now they're more frequent and widespread than ever. Therefore, a leader nowadays needs to recognize which plans and projects are like clocks and which are elusive like clouds. Today, to be successful, a leader needs a paradigm shift to embrace a new approach fit for complexity. This leaves us with the question, what paradigm shift? Today, leaders tackling elusive problems and opportunity need a new paradigm shift to embrace an approach that is fit for complexity. But what paradigm shift? Let's start from today's dominant paradigm, often adopted even without realizing it or knowing where it comes from. Today's dominant paradigm stems from the second industrial revolution of the late 19th century, in the age of electric-powered assembly lines and mass production. It has evolved over time while remaining deeply rooted in its principles. It is predictive, prescriptive, process-centric, generally static, transactional and retributive, mechanistic. From a scientific point of view, it is deterministic and reductionist. It has brought us combustion engines, modern medicine, semiconductors, and much more. It is known as Fordism and Taylorism. Most organizations still operate with a playbook rooted in Fordism and Taylorism. So are many of the new practices and tools, and those we use every day. Even schooling still instills it in us. With the proliferation of elusive problems, more recently called complex, some started to realize that Fordism and Taylorism are not fit for complexity. These leave us with two questions. Why and what comes after Fordism and Taylorism? Fordism and Taylorism, fit for complexity, collapsed under the weight of knowledge work, the digital revolution and the information age, and got replaced. In the 90s, a new tech industry emerged, fueled by the personal computing and internet revolutions. No previous generation ever experienced such piece of innovation, rate of change, and prevalence of complex problems. Therefore, Fordism and Taylorism's unfitnesses for complexity led to the failure of most software development projects. Yet, the seeds of alternative ideas have been sprouting since the 30s. For example, with Toyota, that built better, cheaper cars than Ford and General Motors, Olivetti, that created programmable calculators used in NASA's moon missions, Jane Jacobs, that revolutionized urban planning, Christopher Alexander, that transformed architecture. Those alternative ideas and new revolutionary values, principles, and practices birthed software development lightweight methods. Their groundbreaking success led to a new paradigm fit for complexity. This paradigm shift was a quantum leap toward a new philosophy of work, management, and leadership. We may call it complexity thinking. It is empirical, participative, people-centric, adaptive, collaborative, and restorative, organic and humanistic. Scientifically, it is holistic, non-ergodic, and explicable in terms of human complexity science. Why hasn't this new paradigm taken root? And organizations claiming to embrace it perpetuate all Fordism and Taylorism in new clauses. How can we finally succeed? Despite the prevalence of complex problems and opportunities, complexity thinking as a new philosophy of work, management, and leadership remains largely overlooked. How can we embrace complexity thinking to benefit our industry, profession, and the community? Beyond the typical hurdles of any social change, human nature can hinder our ability to embrace complexity thinking, with our innate aversions to uncertainty, ambiguity, and unknowns, and our deep-seated desire for a simple and convincing narrative, certainty, and control. However, from our human nature also come the innate abilities to tackle complexity, like when we apply abstract values and principles to real-life situations, reconcile inconsistencies between two value systems, navigate the traffic in a big city, or navigate social situations ambiguities, manage conflicting emotions and reach clear decision, manage being a parent, live in an extended or combined family. On top, we all recently experienced a holy crisis. Brexit, COVID, the Ukraine war, the Gaza-Israel conflict, the Red Sea crisis, and more. As a training ground, these strengthened our ability to endure everyday's complexity. So, what else must we do to unleash complexity thinking in our workplace? First, to use our innate abilities at work, we need organizations that inspire employees. to freely express all their humanity and bring their creativity, talent, and full self at work. Second, to overcome our innate aversions, leaders need to champion new behaviors and principles aligned with the complexity thinking. This leaves us with the question: which new behaviors and principles leaders need to champion? Which novel behaviors and principles must leaders embrace to effectively address complex problems and opportunities? Our greatest strength is our inherent predisposition to complexity. We are indeed the most adaptable element of any organization. On the other hand, the weaknesses we must overcome are the legacy of Taylorism and Fordism and the...
Yeah, just a second, I refix the video and I'm just checking. Do you hear audio is good? Okay, let me start again. Let me share again. Here we go. Let's start again.
Non-complexity fit habits that we mentioned previously. Many have already embarked on this new journey. In journalism, sociology, history, physics, biology, or the big tech company, can leaders really afford to lag behind? The first two novel complexity fit behaviors leaders need to embrace are: first, awareness of the existence of elusive, complex problems and opportunity that transcend Taylorism and Fordism and today's prevailing approaches. Second, recognition of which problems and opportunities are complex and which not, and the need for a complexity fit approach. Ignoring all these will be like pretending to thrive in a jungle while being trained in a zoo. Here is a test. Can you recognize which of these problems are complex and which not? Purchasing a popular t-shirt on Amazon, or crafting a bespoke wedding dress, purchasing a spare part for your road car, or crafting a car's part for a Formula One top team. Here are a couple of hints. We can unfold an origami and learn how to make one. Disassemble a clock to understand how each part makes it work. However, we cannot disentangle a cloud from the sky or an intricate tunnel system of an ant nest. Here, a few signs that we are dealing with a complex problem or opportunity. Uncertainty and unknowns emerge. Information and our understanding are partial, fragmented. Still, there's no time to process what we got. We sense a lack of control for the many interdependencies, frequent interactions, and external influences. Things can unexpectedly snowball. The problem is constantly evolving, never fully solved, but needs our constant attention. What are the other complexity fit behaviors leaders must embrace? Leaders like...
Okay. I think the part of the video that I wanted to share is this one. And the things that I will ask you to think about is what kind of elusive problem are you facing in your life, at work, in your team, or in your organization. During the video, I kind of used the terminology of projects that are kind of like clocks. They work like a clockwork, or you can understand them like you can understand the clock, or instead problems or projects that are more like clouds, hard to understand. So I will ask you to think about if you are facing some of these elusive problems at work, if you have some example in mind, and how you approach them in your team and your organization, what worked, what not, if you want to share that. And what is your opinion? Do you think that your team and your organization is approaching this kind of problems in a way that is effective, or do you think we need a different paradigm? I want to give you some time to think about comments and questions that you want to make. I see there is Slido available, so you can add the questions and vote a question or comments or things you want to share with everyone. And while I give you some time, so I put on screen a slide with that are comparing traditional paradigm and this new philosophy that I'm kind of talking about, a philosophy of work management and leadership. So I give you some time to add and vote a question, comments, or anything you want to discuss. I will bring you on video if you want, or audio, and we talk about that together.
So I've got a question just so we can kick stuff off that I came to my mind. It sounded to me like a big part of the complexity fit that you're describing is just a matter of being humble enough to assume that our plans need to change, whereas most of the other like the dominant paradigm you're describing, a lot of that seems to have the assumption that we can plan something and then just execute the plan, like start a clock and it will continue to work. Is that a matter of the humility of people making decisions? Is that a matter? What do you think?
Well, on one side, each one of us, I realize it have a preference because maybe they met a lot of problems that are predictable, problems, opportunities, and some of us instead lived and work in situations that are less predictable. But going back to your point, yes, being able to look at the nature of the problem and recognize if we are dealing with something that is unpredictable and accept the consequences of that. And the consequences can be widespreading. It's not only the plan, but when I tell someone to do something and things change, my whole leadership style need to change because it's not about executing order or directive anymore. And making agreement with customers, making contracts. How can I make a promise to a customer when there is no certainty on the outcome because we are building it together and we don't know if we will be happy at the end? And when something goes wrong, what can I ask to people in terms of delivery when there is uncertainty and we don't even know if what we are asking to them is possible or feasible within budget and time constraint, and if in the end will fit the real need because the problem is shifting or we have not understood that. So there are a lot of things that change. So yes, I agree to your point, Mark, and I don't know if I answer.
No, that's great. And I think what you just mentioned is the thing where how can we commit to something for the customer if we're not even sure it can be done? But one thing I see that often gets missed is because there's always this idea of what if it takes longer? What if we're not able to deliver as soon as we thought and what we committed? But we've also got the other side of what if we start on something and then it turns out it's not important anymore? Like, are we willing to, we could keep following our plan and deliver exactly what was asked for, but turns out not to be what anyone wants. And that seems to be, you kind of need both sides, making sure that if we're not able to do something, we have a mechanism to make sure that's directed well, but also making sure we don't keep doing things after we discover they're not really valuable to us anymore. Or I guess the other thing is finding out if the knowledge is there that it's no longer valuable, making sure that the organization actually knows that instead of discovering it after they put 6 months, 9 months, 12 months worth of effort into it. But that all comes to kind of being like the adaptive part that you were saying. And I don't think we as organizations, I don't think we're very good at
that. Thinking about what you are saying, I have in mind two situations. Think about let's say, being in the same room and coming to the conclusion that you are making, like, oh, we don't need this anymore. And if you are in the same room, you are touching the same artifact, you are seeing the same thing, and you agree on the same conclusion, then it can be harder to make those changes, but at least everyone know and agree that need to be done. Imagine if something is not in the room, is not have a different understanding of the current situation and what they may think about someone wanting to stop what has already been agreed, planned, committed. Yeah, it become really difficult. It can become really difficult.
Hey, Tom, did you want to ask? You had a comment about something you thought was similar.
It wasn't. I missed a couple of words in it, but anyhow, Luca, do you know who Nadia and I can't pronounce her last name, Bayeva is?
No, please tell me more.
She is someone from Kazakhstan who has a reinvention program, but that she's done with apparently hundreds of companies, done a lot of TED Talks and things like that. And it sounds like this stuff is kind of related to reinvention, personal reinvention, business reinvention, all kinds of things. And one of the things she emphasizes that in the past, in the beginning, when Fordism and Taylorism were created, reinvention occurred about once every 70 years. And now it's 6 months or less, which really not only says you're going to come up with a lot of complexity and uncertainty, but you're going to do it a lot more frequently than you used to. But it might be good. It might be worth at least getting hold of her. I don't know how you can, but you might be worth it.
Thank you for the suggestion. Can I dare to ask what are your thoughts about where organization stands in relation to this? Do you have the impression that many organizations are facing this type of elusive and complex problem or not? And do you have the sense that they are dealing with them in an effective way or not? What is your view or experience on this?
Well, I would say the answer to the first question is yes, they're experiencing it. It's happening to them on a daily basis. Just the market changes all the time on them. The environment changes. Part of LA burned down a couple of weeks ago. Well, that's a big change overall to the whole infrastructural support of that part of the state. How are they handling it well? Not very many. Not very many are doing it well. They're old patterns a lot of the times.
Well, thank you for sharing, Tom. Thank you very much, and also for the suggestion that I see Mark shared the LinkedIn link for the lady I think you mentioned, or the man, I don't know.
Tom, is that who you're talking about?
Not where is it in chat?
Yes.
Yes, that's Nadia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's see. Next question. Daniel D. Did you want to come on and kind of highlight your question here?
No, that's okay. Just throwing out the questions.
Okay. Well, here I'll read it then. So this seems more about tackling uncertainty rather than just complexity. Clocks and manufacturing lines are somewhat complex, right? But there's more changing variables and dependencies.
Yeah. Look, I don't remember. Oh my God. Just watched the video and I don't remember if I had this example. But let me make some example from real life. Think about the sometimes uncertainty or social complexity when we meet people. Like here, we are talking, we never met before, and we don't know each other, and it's kind of difficult and ambiguous. Would you like me? Would you like what I say? Would I like you? Would I understand you? Do you have a common background? It's an ambiguous situation. We manage to deal with that. Think about another social situation where a lot of people is involve combined or extended family with history. We also have history in the more traditional families, and then something happen and have repercussion and maybe have history that remain there. And there are a lot of interdependencies, and simple action can snowball and create effect. So basically, Daniel, I'm telling that on top of uncertainty, there is a degree of interdependencies where actions may lead to unpredictable results. And there is that example that I mentioned that we can predict the planet. Do you remember the video at the start? There are things in our life where using the right equation, we can predict things 100 years from now. And then there is life, and we cannot predict how human, customers, or the market will interact. Does this make sense, Daniel? Does this answer expand a little more on the point you were pointing out?
Yeah, thank you, Luca. Appreciate it.
And another aspect here too is the differentiation between complexity and complicated. And the way I've heard it explained, I usually get these mixed up, but something that's complex means you don't know what it's going to do. It's hard to tell what it's going to do. Something that's complicated may be hard to understand, like a very complicated watch. It has many complications. I mean, it's even called that, but it's not difficult to predict what it's going to do once you understand it. And so maybe some of that is the differentiation between complexity and things being complicated, because you can have a very complicated system that's very easy to predict what it's going to do, and it always does the same thing. But you can have something like a double-hinged pendulum you can look at a double-hinged pendulum and see exactly what it is. It's not like you're trying to figure out what all the parts are, but it's going to be nearly impossible to actually predict what it's going to do. It's very difficult to predict.
Yeah, maybe that's where I was kind of getting off track, right?
No, but I think that's an important thing to differentiate between, because otherwise I think if we assume it's the same thing, we may not properly assess what type of system we're dealing with. But
And
great
Daniel,
point.
sorry, can I ask you, Daniel, what is your experience? Do you see those kind of complex or elusive problems in your daily work? Is something that you experience more often than not, or?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to those changing variables, and especially when you get a lot of different dependencies involved within a project, and then I think it makes it a lot harder to adapt at that point. So.
Well, thank you for sharing your experience. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Hey, Lucas, let's hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, it's a budding thought in my head. Certainly not well built out. It's just something that popped up in the span of a couple seconds. But I was thinking maybe it's misalignment of values as well. Perhaps a company is trying to maximize profits, cut as many costs as possible, whereas a user might want like a beautiful experience. They want something that's very usable for them, easy to, use on a regular basis. So I'm thinking that maybe in the pursuit of maximizing profits, that's where we're wanting to calculate out every possible scenario. We want to have like the perfect plan. We don't want any additional scope. Instead, we just want something straightforward, as low cost as possible. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, I think I try to do that in my life when I can. I try always to maximize everything, to get the most out of everything I'm involved into. And there's nothing wrong with that. And sometimes there are situations where that's not possible, or sometimes I find there are situations when it doesn't work, and then I'm happy I can use different skills to deal with the unexpected event. And I can tell you a story. Because these things change. I was working in Formula One, and the company I was working for was in a winning streak. They could predict anything. They had historical data. Formula One races are complex. Every type of a sport competition at the pinnacle is complex and unpredictable, but they had calculated everything. They had historical data, and the sporting and technical regulation was stable enough, and the performance of the driver was like a robot. The driver that is a human but was constantly performing at the top, that things were predictable, and the company becomes so focused on maximizing profit, maximizing everything, then when the sporting and technical regulation changed, well, it was changed because it was getting boring. We were always winning, so that's perfectly fine. But every one of us were so used to maximize things that it became everything fragile, and they didn't understand they were not there anymore to compete, while other teams that they were struggling, they were failing, they were getting things wrong and experimenting, they started to get things, their experimentation approach worked better. So my personal lesson on this story is that both reality are there. It's important to be flexible and do the right things in the right situation.
It's a great experience to share, Luca. And it also reminds me of one of the slides, part of the video that you had shown, talking about like empirical learning being so central to those complex problems, because the more that you do, the more that you experiment, the more that you learn, and you can kind of like use that knowledge as power, as opposed to like trying to calculate everything out perfectly. You can't necessarily do things a lot if you're trying to think through that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, this idea of using the knowledge that you have as much as you can, because if you ignore that, and experimenting and being humble, bringing back a topic, a word from Mark before, being humble where you don't know, and sometimes try out. So one of the things that I was working in Formula One was race strategy, and now I play table tennis the team version. So I try to predict the formation, or sometimes what to do when we get in trouble for relegation or when we are fighting for promotion. And you really don't know. There are so many variables, but on one side, you try to use the knowledge that you have, try to do the best that you can. On the other side, you prepare yourself for the unexpected, and you try to balance those two things.
Thank you for the insights. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Lucas. I say go, Mark.
I want to follow up on something that you said here. We're talking about the racing, because you mentioned that you guys had the organization had gotten so focused on performance that when massive change came, when they started changing the regulation because you were all winning, it sounded like there were a lot of things that you had optimized but not necessarily made robust. Like, you knew you could do this, this, and this, but since you weren't in a situation where you were losing and failing, there maybe was it a situation where there was lots of failure modes that hadn't ever been exercised because you had gotten so good at doing things, but once you started changing stuff up, you didn't have that institutional knowledge of how to deal with chaos because you had worked really good to make sure there wasn't any chaos?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. I remember, I'm trying to interpret the story of the whole team and a lot leadership and myself having a fragmented vision of what was going on. But I remember a leader comment at the time that our performance in that situation, I was not at the team anymore at that time, but this leader says not acceptable. And they were fighting to be first, where realistically they should be fighting to be fifth at that time, then third, then second, then first, and not accepting that the situation was changed. That was the most visible problem. Okay. And then the other problem that you mentioned, Mark, that those will come next. Are we still able to handle a failure mode, to recover, to learn from it, have an experimental approach? Are we still capable of doing that? But that was not, we were not there. There was not even acceptance that the reality was changed.
Interesting.
Someone is writing about, is mentioning Kinevin. Yes, the concepts are similar. The theoretical is exactly that, complexity, like in the Kinevin framework. What is different, or where is the angle, is thinking about how organizations think, and how hard is for organization. And that's a question. I have my point of view, but that's a question for your experience. I want to be enriched by your individual experience. How difficult is for other organizations to accept this different way of looking at problem and handling them in a completely different way, empirical and so on. So yes, to Maureen, I think the person that commented, yes, there is a strong relation to Kinevin, but there is something more in the question here. Thank you, Maureen. Anyone want to share some of their experience with the elusive of complex problem that faced at work, or some thought on their experience in their organization? So while I wait and I give time thinking about, since this is an agile meetup, right? I want also to provoke ourselves as agile and lean professional. And I want to say, when we look at the tools and the practices that we use, are we aware of which practices are based on predictability and how much effort we put on the predictability side, and which practices instead have their root in an empirical approach? And again, I want to throw a provocative idea. OKR are very popular, but for example, OKR have a big root in the predictability side. So if as coaches we use that tool, do you know how to smooth the predictability side and how to embed the empirical side in that?
So talk about that a little more, because I don't think I fully grasped everything you were saying with that.
So OKR is a popular tool, right? And historically, it comes from management by objective. Sorry? Okay. So it comes from management by objective. And the idea is to set the objective and then work toward those objectives. And it's good. It's not like a bus driver. I'm telling you the route. I'm telling you, let's arrive at the airport on time. So management by objective is good, but at the same time, I already know that I want to go to the airport. If I'm building a mechanical part for a Formula One car, I know that I want to go fast, but that's meaningless. The real objective, we found out while we start working on it. If I want a special dress for an event, doing with the material that is new, done with the design that is new, and also I have to look good into it, we will know only when we start to try it the first time what is the goal. The general goal, I want it on time, fast, and nice, is too abstract to give any guidance. So how do we embed, when in our organization we set goal up front, what do we do to inject that empirical approach in a tool that has some predictive way of thinking?
So the thing that comes to mind to me, and kind of tying back to what a little bit what I was saying earlier, is if we if we want to do that and deal with uncertainty, most often work is structured in a way so the only thing that can happen is for scope to grow. So you end up in a situation where if everything, people think everything is going okay as long as you're tracking into the plan and you're doing what you said you were going to do. So that gets you into a case to where the only thing that can happen, even if you're doing really, really well, is for the scope to grow and you find something else that you need to do. It feels to me like there needs to be room for more maybe fear is the word I'm thinking of, but that's not probably the good way but more of this idea that even if we're tracking according to where we thought things were, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're using our feedback in order to shrink scope when we can. That we should be expecting that our plan is one thing, and as we're going through it, there may be some things that we planned on doing that we discover we don't need to do. Now, we don't know what those things are, but if we don't set ourselves up to where we're getting not only feedback to show us when we need to do more, but also feedback to show us when we need to do less, we're going to set ourselves up for failure, because everything will only be able to take longer than we expected. Never shorter, unless we fudged our numbers and tried to pad it to make it long enough that it just happens to work out. But you got to have the tension from both ends. If we discover something else that needs to add to this, or we need to go a different direction that may take longer, we need to have that ability to make that change. But we can't forget, we also need the ability to constrain stuff when we discover something's not. Maybe something still would be, maybe the customer still wants something, but as we get into it, it's like, this may not be worth it to you anymore, and they may deprioritize it. But you've got to have both sides happening. And I see too many organizations that the customer doesn't even want to talk to you as long as they think you're headed on the path. They don't want to come back and say, oh, you know what, maybe that's not as important as we said it was originally, because that's not built into the culture of trying to actually decide what not to do.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the implication of this. So imagine that you are in a situation where you realize you need to steer the plan, adding things, removing things, or accepting that some of the work that you have done is not giving you or leading you to where you want to be. And when you find yourself in that situation, you have an interesting conversation to have with your client, whether it is the manager or the person that is considered accountable, or is taking your team, considering your team or yourself accountable. And then you have the question, what went wrong? Or has anyone made a mistake? Are we steering because we made a bad decision, or are we steering because the nature of the problem comes with uncertainty, unknowns, and we are in uncharted water? So that is the first question, and for some organization is difficult, because if they are used to deliver an order on Amazon, every mistake is backed into the cost. Every step that can go wrong as an insurance or some kind of warranty. And if everything goes okay, even in case of a failure, no one will lose money. Everything is backed into the business model, into the margin and everything. But when something like this happens in a software development project and someone risks to lose money, what is the conversation? Do we have an agreement with the client where we both understand that we are going in uncharted water? Have we agreed with the client, with them, what is the next step and what are the possible results, the costs and the possible results? And do we know what is expected from us, but at the same time, what can happen given the nature of the problem that we have? So, yeah, it's big. When we find ourselves in that situation, a lot of things come into into play. And when I was mentioning before the difference from a punitive approach, I consider yourself accountable. If you had, I give you the time, you have the skill, you worked hard, you know what had to be done, can't go wrong, so it must be your fault. Versus we are in uncharted water, we professionally did the best that we could, we worked hard, and still we didn't get what we wanted because the result of our experiment is not the one that we expected. And it's a different type of conversation and a different impact on the way that we agree work, plan work, and organize our journey through the original project.
It seems like we have the like if you were to hire someone to build a house or a skyscraper or something, and they came back and worked for many years and came back and said, "Oh, it turns out that design falls over and isn't safe," you know, that would not be that would not be acceptable. On the other hand, if they were to come back and say, "Hey, you wanted to use this type of glass on the outside, so we tension tested it, and turns out that's not going to work," before you've actually bought all of it, that probably is acceptable. And I wonder if some of the risk inherent in what you were describing comes from trying to bite off too big of chunks and doing an experiment over like delivering an entire product, which you may need to do, versus delivering a piece of a product.
Yeah, and I will add also the attitude that you mentioned before, the behavior of being open, listening, collaborating. I I hear everyone goes through some home renovation, come up with a lot of uncertainty or unexpected event. When you start to open up, you discover things and things change. And so are you away looking at an Excel and then waiting, like you say, the end, hoping to get what you wanted? Or are you also involved not only making things in small chunk, but also having conversation, being told what are the risks, be involved in the decision where you want to make an experiment or the other, being involved in the decision where this is higher risk, higher reward, but may cost more, this is safer, cheaper, but may last less. So have you been as a customer involved, and have you been part of the decision in steering the experiment so that you can assess? And are you in a situation where you feel that the team that you're working with, the builders that are doing the restructuring or some change in your home, are you in a situation where you can pull out anytime, say, okay, I have enough, I feel this is not working, I don't know if it is because it's too difficult, because we don't understand each other, or because we are just unlucky, but I don't feel this is working. Do I have the opportunity to ask to someone else and try to change something and see if I can make it work? So, or my only chance is to blame you, it must be your fault, because of course it cannot be my fault.
Uh-huh. Good points.
I think we are reaching close the end of the time. I'm wondering if there is some closing comment or questions.
Good. Yeah. Does anyone if you've got a question, feel free to type it in the chat or come off mute and just speak up. And while you're doing that, I will throw a link here. Luca has provided a link to his book on LeanPub with a discount code. So that is right there if you're interested in it. Just click on that link. Any other thoughts? Anything you would like to hear discussed? Well, Luca, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that if someone found this conversation interesting and some of the videos, I'm still publishing some more, just a few more on LinkedIn about more behaviors for leaders. on top of the empirical approach, also the type of behaviors that help us in these. And so if you're interested, follow me on LinkedIn or Mastodon or Blue Sky, and I will share more videos on these topics.
Awesome. And I put a link to your LinkedIn on there so people can follow that. Well, Luca, thank you so much for coming and talking. It was a very interesting conversation as always. And thanks for taking some of your evening to join. I hope you enjoy your dinner. But yes, thank you so much for coming, and look forward to track and seeing what else you're putting out there. We'll let everybody know that next week we are going to be looking at genetic programming. We're going to look at how to draw pictures with randomly placed lines. And I've actually got it running over here on my side trying to draw a picture of Abraham Lincoln. So you'll get to see what was successful, what wasn't. But even if you're not deep in technical side of things, I think it will be an interesting look. We're going to try to keep a good mix between technical stuff and just kind of understanding that this is a problem-solving approach that could be used in a variety of situations. So thank you, everybody, for coming, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Luca.
Thank you.